International Mentoring Community, all things a mentoring lounge, brought to you by the International Mentoring Community, of which Doug and I are the co-founders. And we're going to share a little bit more about who we are, but first, let's just give you a sense of what's going to happen during this conversation, discussion. Sometimes it could even be a debate. Answering your comments depends how this broadcast unfolds. What we're going to do is take a look at this thing called mentorship today. And the reason being is that it's about a discipline. It's about knowledge and skills that we tap into when we're mentoring. So we want to just explore what that's about. And then what we want to do is touch on the mentee and their story in mentoring. Often we come to these broadcasts speaking, sharing more about the mentor, but there's some things we want to go over today. Doug and I have had a couple of conversations. Let's take a look at things like, well, who's a mentee and how can a mentor support the mentee, and what does it mean to be a mentee in today's world? And that's where we want to go with today's broadcast. But like we do, because sometimes you may not know who we are from an international mentoring community point of view, put a .com to that, and you can look up our website. I'm going to have Doug introduce himself. I'll introduce myself. And then what we'll do is we'll get into this broadcast for you watching the video. So Doug, you want to share a little bit about who you are in relation to IMC, which is the short version?
I sure can do that. So my name is Doug Lawrence, and I am one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. And I am the Director of Practice and Outreach for the International Mentoring Community. And I also have my own company, Talent C, which is focused on all things mentoring.
And I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Education and Certification. So if you think about Doug as the one who brings you in, gets you set up, then you work with me through different capacities. And Doug then ends up serving as an auditor verifier, and you get to meet him again. So you sort of get a mix of us as you get involved with IMC. I also have my own company, Wealth Movement, WELLTH, about well-being and well-living. And I look at this notion of the older to be elder, and to do so through an educating approach like mentor. So how might an elder be a mentor? And as I always want to point out, if you want to get into a deep practice conversation about mentoring, have a conversation with Doug. He's the one who does a lot more of the mentoring. I'm doing a more of the education and certification background of what we do. And even in my own work, I don't do a lot of one-to-one. Doug does. So he has lots of insights and experiences that he can share with you. And he also has written a couple books. So you may want to dive into having conversations with Doug. So that's my plug for you, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you.
So to get into our conversation, to take a look at some of the curation of ideas we want to share with you today, one of the things we always do is share the definition of mentoring that IMC uses. And I have Doug go through that. So Doug, you want to just share that definition as a sort of a foundation on which we stand, the seed bed in which we put our seeds?
I sure can. So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where the mentor and mentee learn and grow together through personal and professional development. And if I were to unpack that a bit, some of the things that stand out for me is the aspect of the two-way trusted relationship, and the aspect also that the mentor and mentee both learn and grow together on a personal and professional basis, but from a development perspective. So they're developing their personal and professional, sort of their world, so to speak.
Yeah, and the notion here is that we're speaking about mentoring, that definition. There is a mentor and mentee, and today we're going to look a little bit more from a mentee's perspective. But what encompasses that whole idea of mentoring, mentor, mentee is this thing called mentorship. And that's why we want to explore that today. And I'm going to admit up front, folks, it has a little bit of an academic flavor to it. Yes, I have that background. I introduced myself with doctorate. I have a doctorate in adult education and human performance improvement. I have been a professor in that area. That informs me in my practice and what it is that I do. And it informs the presentation about mentorship today, because I think it's important to get a little bit of that background of the why and the how and the who aspects that we weave in to IMC. Now, we're not an academic-based community. That's not what we're about. But this story I want to share today has that flavor to it, because mentorship, the meaning we associate with it, is from this notion of it's a discipline, a body of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that we want to bring to the foreground. And so it's informed by at least 7 of what people sometimes call the ologies. Ologies means study of something. Now the exception of this is that there's 6 ologies, and then there's philosophy. Oh boy, philosophy always has to be a little bit different character, doesn't it? But the philosophy aspect here, philosophy is about the study of the truth, the fundamental questions about something, or the things that are present. The things here are mentoring, mentor, mentee. There's a philosophy that you use as you enter into mentoring. And to be able to understand it from this mentorship point of view is important. And that's where the other ologies come into play here. So when you sort of mix all of these ologies together underneath the banner of philosophy, you'll get a bit of a robust understanding of why we're talking about mentorship today. So starting with ontology. Oh boy, here we go. Ontology. It's the study of the nature of being. Ontology is when we're looking at what it means to be human, to be fully human, to be natural. Who am I? The word we associate with that is the study of ontology. All right. And really that's about, well, who am I? And these are questions that we ask. Well, who am I as a mentor? Who am I as a mentee? Right? Who am I as a husband? Who am I as a friend? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? You can get into that. And there's a generalized way of looking at that so that it helps us to understand, well, what does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a mother? What does it mean to be a friend? And we bring that study, those understandings into our lives. We may not use the word ontology. We ask the question, who am I? So in this case, who am I as a mentor? Who am I as a mentee? That's what we're taking a look at. The next one we want to unpack is epistemology, the study of the investigation of belief from opinion. In what we be, have, and do, there is this notion of beliefs and opinions. I have my affirming beliefs about being a mentor. And as you get into it, you develop those beliefs as well. Now, there are people who have opinions about what it means to serve as a mentor or being a mentor. And let me give you an example. There are people who say, mentoring and coaching and mentor coach, they're really all the same thing. We need to put a stop to that, okay? Not that I'm trying to put in front of you is that mentoring versus coaching, and it's sort of like 2 rocks hitting each other. They do work together like 1 water plus 1 water equals 1 water. And this is where you want to take a look at the investigation. What do I believe and what are my opinions about mentoring In other words, serving as a mentor, being a mentee. There is an epistemology to that, and that you can explore that, investigate that more and more as you go. And I know for myself, as I came to understand myself as a mentor, realizing I really wasn't a coach, I came to understand this notion of my beliefs about the educating approach called mentoring I wanted to use versus, in this sense, in connection, comparison, collaboration with coaching. Now, Doug, in your own practice, you have come to have great belief in what it means to be mentoring. Now, I'm not going to place epistemology on top of you, but you have in your own way developed your affirming beliefs versus limiting beliefs about mentoring. How did you come to understand that? You started in through which way? At work, studies? Where did you come to enter into the world of mentoring?
If I think back, my entry into the world of mentoring was through the leadership door, where I was working with people, didn't really know what it was I was doing until I started to do some research before I got into my mentoring practice full time. And it was as I was going through that, I went, so that's what they call mentoring. And I kept expanding on that to grow my knowledge, but also to grow how I interacted and dealt with individuals in a mentoring capacity. So the short answer is it was through the leadership window that I actually got my kickstart, so to speak, in the mentoring world.
So in through leadership in a workplace kind of setting, probably is more. So in a sense, you did the philosophy, ontology, epistemology. You used the word research, right? You look for the truth of what is mentoring. You look for what is the nature of being a mentor. You looked at what are my beliefs and opinions. So if we take those academic words away, that's what you did as you moved into, you then, in a sense, immersed yourself in the discipline of mentorship. Would that be fair if I?
Yeah.
I'm attempting to bring the practicality to this notion of the academic world and getting Doug to help this out. So I hope that lands. That makes sense to you, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So there are 4 others I want to just explore. Now, we've heard these terms in many different ways. It's psychology, sociology, physiology, and ecology. So put it in terms of mentorship. Psychology is really about a personal perspective, looking at the person, mind, and behavior. So what do I do as a mentor? There's a psychology to that. What does a mentee do as they come in terms of being a person and their mindfulness, their minding of what's going on? The sociology is really about the group perspective. It's about persons and group work and the behavior that they exhibit. So when you enter in as a mentor and a mentee into this arrangement and connection, then there's a sociology that gets framed because now you're a group. So as individuals, you now became a group. So there's a psychology of each of you that now forms a sociology of joining together. Now, what's really interesting is that there's a physiology, there is a body response, a mind-body connection that takes place. And one of the great ways is like when you're in your conversation, how are you sitting? Arms folded across your chest, sort of leaning away or looking away. There is a physiology, or you can sort of see it in their eyes. Am I leaning in and am I listening? And you can feel the person being there. There's a physiology, but there's also an ecology, which is ecology usually is about the human nature response, their connection. But in terms of the ecology for mentorship, where and when is the mentoring taking place? There is an ecology, right? Coffee shop versus a quiet room in the building, to maybe it's over a Zoom call. There is an ecology for it. So I just wanted to bring that forward from a psychology, sociology, physiology, and ecology are 4 other ologies that are underneath the banner of mentorship that have reasons for you to go explore each one of those. Even though you may not use those words, you might say, well, what's the behavior that I need to bring? What's the behavior the mentee needs to bring? We're going to explore that a little bit more. So when we're together, what happens? All right. What's the best way for me to be present as I'm sitting there with the mentee? How do I set up the situation so that we can both learn? Those are questions linked to the academic flavor of it. But I wanted to give that to, not but, I'm going to take but out there. And I want to give it to you so that you understand that from a mentorship point of view, you can dive into the philosophy, the ontology, the epistemology, the psychology, the sociology, the physiology, the ecology. I actually went into a webinar once, and what we did was we looked at the 260 ologies of human existence. I'm only bringing out 7 right now. But again, I was interested in how we look at this thing called life. And I wanted to bring out these 7 as links to mentoring. But I'm hoping that through Doug's experience and what he's explaining and what we do next is we bring the practicality to that academic flavor. All right. It's not every day that we're going to be bringing out the academicness of mentorship more than the practicality, but I think it was timely. Some people were poking around with us in conversations, and we thought that we would at least acknowledge that. Anything you want to add to that storyline, Doug?
The only thing to add was that I wish I would have gone through this a little sooner. So, because it's actually quite, I can see how the academic piece fits into the practice of mentoring. So it does make sense to, if nothing else, for us to understand the ologies and how they do interact in a mentoring practice with the practice of mentoring.
Yeah, because they do give the background concepts that link to the practices and the attitudes that's required. That's the knowledge, skills, attitude storyline that we hear, and bringing those forward. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But I think what that does is that takes us into the world of mentor-mentee. So if mentorship is sort of the discipline, mentoring is the process that you use, the system that we use. In that process system is the mentor and the mentee. And sometimes people will look at it from mentor and mentee phrasing. Some might use mentee and mentor. Some might use mentor to mentee, mentee to mentor. I went out and sort of took a look at how do people search for it. And what we tend to see more is mentor and mentee, mentor to mentee, is that it's the mentor story to the mentee. But we didn't want to give up on the importance of mentee. So that's why we're going to have a little bit more emphasis on the word mentor. Mentee, my apologies. See, even I fell into it. So what does it mean being a mentee? Can you remember back to the first time that you were a mentee, and what does that mean for you, Doug? I didn't prep Doug for this one, so I'm just tapping into what he's going to come up with here.
So, knowing what I know today, my first experience as a mentee would have been probably with my uncle, who was in the Canadian military and was most definitely a role model for me. And, there were conversations that we had that would help shape the direction I was going to head and that sort of thing. So it would definitely be him. But what I also found was as I progressed in life was the aspect of the fact that they're from an informal mentoring. So we've got formal mentoring and informal mentoring. From an informal perspective, there was lots of mentoring going on around me that I needed to be open to, but I also needed to be receptive or intuitive enough to be able to pick up on this is, these are things, these are points, these are guiding statements, these are ways that I can improve myself, but still not know what it was called at that particular stage. But right, so but the outcomes were much the same.
And that's a reflective point that I would encourage all of you who are listening in. What Doug is sharing is, oh yeah, I'm thinking back. Yeah, I'm going back and taking a look at, I didn't realize that I may have been a mentee at that point in time. I may not have called it. That's a really great reflective practice. And I would encourage all mentors to do that. True?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because I went back, I could go back into my parents' life, but I know the time when I was a mentee was when I was in grade 8, and I was given or asked to be a representative of my class into a community group. And there was leadership that went with that. And that's when I stepped into a mentor-mentee, the person who helped me. And then that person helped me move into the whole nature-informed, nature-inspired world of recreation. And I can remember what that person did, and I can remember that person's name, right? But the next mentor that I met, for the life of me, I can't remember that person's name, right? Because they gave me more process-related work. But the one who introduced me into the feelings of being with nature, that was my first mentor. So in terms of how to be a mentee or how to be a good mentee, I know there's things that a mentor can do to help a mentee, but when you think of that question of how to be a mentee, how to be a good mentee, Doug, is there anything that jumps to the surface for you, right?
From a mentee perspective?
Yep.
It's commitment on the part of the mentee. It's the commitment to the mentoring process versus, well, I think I'm going to try this out, and then if it doesn't materialize or whatever, I'm going to walk away from it. Because I've had situations where we've had the conversation, I will commit to the relationship if you commit, and by committing, that's, we'll meet on those times that we have regularly scheduled to meet, and there'll be some things that we'll have to do as part of the process, but we both have to commit to that journey. And that to me is probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, whereas Doug and I both mentioned is that we may not have known it as mentoring when we thought back into when we first got exposed to this notion of mentoring. I think the storyline that I would bring out about how to be a mentee, how to be a good mentee, is to be present and meet whoever it is you're going to have a conversation with underneath this banner of mentorship and mentoring, is that you just be open and wholehearted. That is how that you can do it. Because now that we are both, we're adults, we're more, if I use the terms elders who actually are elders, right? I consider Doug and I both elders in our own way as elder educator mentors, right? If I was to use my language that goes with that, to be able to open up and ask the mentee to come with that flavor, that approach is really important. I think there are things that we as mentors can do and be and have when we interact with the mentee, that I want Doug to sort of share with us, because I asked him to come up with 3 ideas, right, when I was prepping the final script for today's video. I said, can you come up with three things a mentor can do to support a good mentee. And I'm just going to have him go through them. And if I want to add something to it, I'm just going to put in my 2 toonies worth, right? So we'll go over that. So Doug, this is for you to share. What are those 3 things a mentor can do to support a mentee?
Well, you can definitely hold them accountable for their part in the whole process, but you also need to hold yourself accountable. So you need to be, mindful of that. So number 1 is, what can a mentor do to support a good mentee is the accountability aspect. Is we need to be focused on outcomes. The second one is there will be times where you just need to be quiet and you need to listen and hear what the mentee is saying in order for you to be able to understand. There'll be trigger words in that conversation, and for you to understand that those trigger words are going to help guide you to where you need to go next. So there will be questions, statements that you need to make in order for the conversation to evolve, where you'll be working towards outcomes that you want to achieve. So there's the listening and hearing, and the other part of that equation is to be non-judgmental as well. So you want to be supportive and not judgmental whatsoever. And finally, the last one, and it's one that's becoming more and more predominant. In fact, I was dealing with this yesterday, even in somewhat into the later part of the day, where things were being said and messages were being posted, and I realized that there was some mental health issues or challenges that we needed to be aware of, and I needed to kind of interject myself into the conversation to say, time out, we need to have a chat. Do we need to set up a time for us to have a more structured conversation, a more formal one as it relates to your mental health? And the decision was made that the support structure was good enough as it is without me getting involved and stuff. But we do have a follow-up call coming up in the next couple of days where we'll actually go through that stuff. So I would say that the third thing is definitely, as a mentor, how I can support a good mentee, and this person is definitely that, is to be just aware of their mental health state, whereabouts they are at that particular time.
Yeah, I agree with all 3 of those, and the accountability for it is shared. The responsibility to do what you're supposed to do is shared. Listening and hearing is shared. The response that you give to each other is shared, right? And this mental health awareness is shared as well. And hopefully the mentee can pick up, even if something may not be quite there for the mentor at that point in time, but that might take a little bit more practice. But I'm hoping is that with the stories that Doug is sharing, and we link it back to those 7 ologies or 6 ologies in philosophy, right? Those are places that you can go learn more to be able to bring back to this accountability, responsibility, listen, hear, response, mental health awareness, right? You can go back and dig into those to find more ways in which to bring that richness, that deepness into what it is you do. And that's why we shoot a lot of the videos that we do. That's why we created the library we have. That's why there's the YouTube channel of International Mentoring Community. These are places that we're attempting to bring out more of these insights, all right, to be able to have that flavor. So that's really great. And I thought, Doug, I didn't chat with you about this, but I thought what I would do is who is a mentee? All right. It was a question I asked myself, and I wrote down 5. And I thought that we can just play with this just a little bit as from a place of closing out. Okay. And then we'll look to close up. So who's a mentee? Learner? Because sometimes mentees are called learners, proteges, apprentice. All right. And what they're doing is they're gaining a perspective. Mentees are also explorers. And how might we encourage them to explore from a landscape perspective, versus they might be a discoverer from a portrait perspective. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just sort of looking at, if you think of, I'm exploring the landscape, but I'm discovering the portrait. Maybe what I want to do is I'm going to look at a particular point. I'm going to discover that particular point, but that particular point may be in the wider scope. So from a mentoring point of view, right, you might have landscape, but in there is how do I support the mentee because maybe of a mental health situation that has arisen. All right, there's a portrait asked. So the mentee themselves are learner, explorer, discoverer, just as the mentor is. Two other things, I think what a mentee is also is a shaper, all right, is bringing all of that together and shaping, well, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm now knowing, this is what I'm going to do, all right, because of the mentoring, that interactions with the mentor. Me as a mentee, I'm going to shape what it is that's going to unfold next. And I also think this is true. A mentee is a broadcaster. Just like we're doing this broadcast, we're looking at this as mentors. A mentee, all right, by learning something, could have set up their own broadcast, their own podcast, shoot videos, and sharing their points of view as well. So that's important to take a look at that. And that's why I thought that I would add that in, because when I was preparing the notes for this, right, I said, man, who is a mentee? Learner, explorer, discoverer, shaper, broadcaster. Well, that's kind of interesting. So I thought that I would share it as sort of a going out gift on this broadcast. So again, I just want to get everyone to a point of, hey, subscribe. Maybe add comments if you're watching this from a random putting this up in YouTube in front of you. Then come in, subscribe, add comments, do interact with us. We would so appreciate it. And just as a reminder, we do these live broadcasts. Sometimes we do recorded, but this is a live broadcast. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, whether that's standard or daylight. It depends which way we go with it. You can certainly join us, and I know we would appreciate seeing you, and that we as Doug and I and anyone else who joins this. I think that's going to bring us pretty well to a close, Doug. I think that what I would do is I would just mention is that I'm the one who brings you in. Doug is going to say goodbye and share something that he's picked up today that he wants to bring to your attention so you can attend to it. And when I know when he's done, I'll just say take care and we'll close out the broadcast. So it's over to you, Doug.
So for me, the message that I want our listeners today to take away with them is that we had some really good information that I would have loved to have had when I first started mentoring, but take the time and the effort to go back and listen to the video today, and especially focus on the ology part, where you're going to go on a learning experience all of your own.
Great. Well, thanks very much and take care, everyone.